Hello, I'm Nurul and I'm the core team member of Children and Youth Advisory Board for Climate Forward Pakistan, and today's event is also organized by Climate Forward Pakistan considering the dynamics of South Asia. Before we go into the panel, I would just want to introduce what Climate Forward Pakistan is and what work it does. Climate Forward Pakistan is a youth-led organization dedicating to mobilizing and empowering Pakistan's youth in addressing urgent challenges of climate change. Founded with the mission of creating a sustainable and resilient future, CFP focuses on advocacy, education and community engagement to foster climate action across Pakistan. By organizing events, youth-led initiatives and policy dialogues, CFP provides a platform for young leaders to voice their perspectives, promote environmental justice and drive tangible change. Operating at both national and international levels, CFP strives to shape a future where Pakistani youth are central to climate solutions from policy advocacy to grassroots actions. With that being said, let's move into the introduction of our two young panelists from Bangladesh and India. Mr. Ashiq Iqbal from Bangladesh is a BSc in Civil Engineering, MSc in Water Resource Development, and has researched in Institute of Water and Flood Management, Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology. His research work focuses on climate science, hydroclimate disaster management, and adaptation technology. Thank you, Ashiq, for joining us today. Then we have Ayadi Mishra, who is currently the chair of We Are Tomorrow, the global partnership, and serves as the director of Enact Earth Foundation. She is a researcher in nature-based solution and linkages of climate extremes in Indian Institute of Technology, Mumbai. Now, as you all know that our panel is focused on climate mobility in South Asia, urban challenges and human impacts. Obviously, South Asia and also the countries like India and Pakistan, Bangladesh being one of the most vulnerable to climate impacts, floods every single year, the cyclones that we had, Biparjoy recently, you all must know the name of that. Considering those dynamics and the role of youth in that, I'll just first be asking Mr. Ashiq Iqbal a question regarding his expertise, and that is, considering your expertise in hydrology and civil engineering, how do urban areas in South Asia adapt to increasing challenges related to water scarcity and flooding exacerbated by climate mobility?
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Before going to the adaptation, I would like to just say a few words on climate mobility perspective. Here we are talking about urban challenge and also human aspect. So from very grassroots level, when we work with people, they do not feel the climate issue in their mobility, or they know that they are migrating because they do not have the livelihood and security, they do not have the economic security in the area they are living or they have born. So they are just moving for economic security. But the major factor, the push factor behind this is the hydroclimatic disasters they are impacting. They do not feel this. That's why it's necessary for us people like who are working on scientific and also in impactful places to link this, and we are the people who can solve this. They knew their stuffs very well earlier, but recently they are not very much familiar with this extreme events unfolding in recent years. So it's becoming tough for them to understand the issues, why it is happening, what is the major reason behind this. So after that they can maybe solve, but as they do not have the scientific knowledge, they do not know how to like cope up with this or adapt with this. That's why the mobility challenge is increasing a lot in South Asian region, especially in the rural area or in the vulnerable communities. So what you were saying about the disasters, mostly flood, cyclones, we are very used to with this for hundreds of years. But the intensity and frequency of these disasters we are having in recent years, that is unprecedented. So they knew that they will have a maybe a small flood of 10 days, they will save their money for 10 days. but they do not know how to cope up with this if they are having 3 or 4 floods in a year, and also the devastating flash flood, maybe with 3-4 hours lead time, that will destroy their agricultural lands. So it's where the main challenges come. And also about the cyclones, earlier time maybe they have one cyclone in 10 years, and now they are having 3-4 cyclones in 1 year. So that's where the challenges are coming. About adaptation, people are seeing the mobility and the migration as a adaptation strategy. That's really sad, I would say. And few years ago, I have seen some reports and papers that people have like people with who have responsible positions, they promoted this type of migration as an adaptation strategy. Like, you do not have your livelihood security in your vulnerable communities, so you can move to the city and urban areas. There you will have your economic security. Then maybe one person from the family is moving to the urban area, they are earning good and sending back the money. But that's not should be in when we consider human and social perspective. At Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology, in the Institute of Water and Flood Management, it's mostly, the university is mostly engineering and technology related, but we focus on integrated water resource management. So our adaptation strategy cannot be only infrastructure based or only engineering basis. It need to have integration of everything: social aspects, economic aspects, political aspects, scientific aspects. So this is what we need to focus on when we think about adapting. We are having issues in the coastal region of salinity intrusion, so that is very tough to adapt. So there we need to come up with ideas of saline tolerant agriculture. We are talking about floods, so we need to be prepared for extreme events. Earlier, when we design any infrastructure or any planning, we used to have maybe 15 or 20 years return period of event to consider. But now, sometimes when we do the statistical analysis, we do consider one extreme event as outlier. Now we need to consider that event while we are thinking about adaptation strategy. Due to climate change, that is what we're gonna face. That one extreme event that maybe earlier time we have once in 100 years. So when we are considering maybe having some infrastructural designing in the rural area, we need to think that how it can help people not to move as a migrant in the urban area. Even after that, people are moving, people will move. It's not very much easy to adapt with the changes and the disasters we are facing with climate change. And while they are moving in the urban area, in those areas that is very much underdeveloped, or maybe some bare lands, government do not have an infrastructure there, they are just making or creating some slums and started living. So there we also need to focus on how we can have some, we will have some climate migrants. So how the urban areas can adapt them. Are those urban areas ready to adapt these poor migrants? No. I don't think that any cities in South Asia, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan are ready to adapt those migrants. So while we plan for our beautiful, nice urban areas, we plan for developed aspects and for like more developing people and for the developing economies. But we need to focus that they will not be able to afford those areas. So how we can adapt those slum areas and have a better city life, or maybe you can say peri-urban life for them, so they can also adapt with their livelihood challenges. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Ashik. You talked about infrastructure and proper planning for creating safe spaces so that they are not hit the same way by climate disasters, and taking the same thing forward as Ayadi works on nature-based solutions. I would want to ask the question that what initiatives can address the challenges of urban climate mobility while ensuring sustainable livelihoods?
I think, again, it's a three-part question. So understanding ecosystem restoration would also mean that you have a certain capacity for the earth. So your soil, your water, your plants, everything have a certain capacity and a certain group of people to support. If that is not degraded, that's the first part, then you conserve that, you protect it to whatever pristine level you can, because the idea is not to have it untouched, but the idea is to have it, again, be able to support the city, the rural areas, etc., that come together. Because when we think about cities, they are not in isolation as such, not yet. Because we do trade, we trade in like informal and formal ways, but also our food systems, everything else is reliant on, as Ashik said, rural areas. Then the part is about restoration. So when you don't stop degrading, you start conserving, and then you start working on restoration. That's what I focus on, and that could be done in a lot of different ways. My focus is on nature-based solution, because again, living in cities, living in a concrete jungle like my city Mumbai, it's very easy to forget where we come from and what the reason why we're alive. It's not just food, it's also the air we breathe. It's again really small things like, if you might have heard the current news in India, the AQI for the national capital Delhi is about 1700. Hazardous levels are about at 100. And this happens because of a lot of urban effects that can be mitigated by nature-based solutions. So for example, even in the city of Baku, if you're roaming around and you're around like really, really tall buildings, and suddenly you have the elevation of the buildings changes. So for example, from 26, 30 floors, you go to about 3 or 5 floors. You have a lot of eddy currents. That means you'll feel the breeze harder. If you have a lot of cement and concrete around, you'll also feel warmer or colder. So if you feel those subtle changes, and then you go to green areas like parks, shaded areas, it's really simple. That is one of the solutions. But over there, what I focus on would be, it has to be native species. It can't just be grass imported from Western countries, which is a norm in a lot of South Asian countries. But other than that, these kind of solutions not only add to our quality of life. So as you said, there are a lot of informal settlements who probably don't have access to water, who don't have good homes that can protect them, who don't have enough food or shelter to even survive. But this also adds to, for example, livelihood services. So you get better jobs. You'll have, again, there's a lot of economic and, again, employment opportunities in sustainable agriculture and agri-food systems, or just something as simple as ecotourism, which is, again, like, for example, we went to the Candy Cane Mountains during our rest day at COP. And that was something really beautiful. That's not something that you see in any other place. If we don't preserve those spaces, what is that Baku can offer us? For example, this city right here, of course, there are really, really cool structures, like, again, structures designed by, for example, Zaha Hadid, but they work because they're in line with the space itself. We're talking more about the reason that we need to work on climate adaptation and restoration is that if, Khuda na khasta, something happens to such a city, where would the people go? How would you support them? How would you, again, give them basic stuff? Food, water, shelter. This is everything that comes across all the time. And the backbone of this is our ecosystem, the services that these systems offer. And that's why, again, ecosystem restoration. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Again, the conversation is like centered around how we can design our urban spaces as such that they can be more climate resilient and at the same time more breathable for us. Talking about infrastructure again, Ashik, I would want to ask that what would be your suggestion or recommendations toward infrastructure and planning better for climate mobility and environmental degradation in urban areas?
Thank you. So here I would like to differentiate two urban areas. One is the major cities, and then other is the urbanizing cities. I would say that they were not that much urbanized earlier, but now with time, with the demand, they are urbanizing. So the old cities, it's pretty challenging to like make them to adapt with the recent challenges of natural disaster and climatic impacts, because it's already had a plan. So it's now more people and new kind of event unfolding.
Yeah.
So here we need to be more cautious, more planned, so that we can plan further, maybe 20, 30, 50 years ahead. But what is our opportunity is the urbanizing cities. That is very maybe small towns. So we have small districts, and maybe the people from that community are directly moving in the major cities for their livelihood options. So our like opportunity can be the small towns inside those districts area, and also people are moving in those area at first, but most of the small towns in South Asia cannot give them the proper necessary livelihood options they need. Also there is issues with management. I have seen that in most of our cities, the lakes, they have been filled with dumped waste and silted up. It creates the waterlogging.
Yeah.
Even with maybe 1 hour of rainfall, every town is under flood for maybe 5-6 hours, and it's pretty hard to move in the speed of the life in urban areas. 6 hours is a lot. It would have been very easy if we can have an integrated management. Maybe the people there, they know how to manage things. They need to have the ownership. As in cities areas, most of the people, they are not native. They do not feel the ownership to manage or like how to manage or how to maintain and operate those infrastructural structures that can help us to adapt with the natural disasters.
Yeah.
So that is one very important thing.
Yeah.
And then I would say also our cities areas are we have our opportunity to adapt with more people, but we need to think in a strategical way that we do not destroying our natural resources. That might lead to another issues in for future. So yeah, thank you.
Pretty much resonates with Pakistan too, because we do tend to urbanize much over agricultural land, and that is causing a second issue, because we are cutting down the trees and the agricultural land is being converted, and the carbon sequestration, the source and sink ratio is being disproportionate, and that is why we are suffering more from these impacts. And the same goes for, I guess, India, but India is doing well, considering that they have put a lot of efforts into designing and managing their stuff. But though India is doing good, Ayadi, I would still want to ask you, what actions as youth can we take, or strategies can we implement to make the situation better in South Asia?
I did my bachelor's in architecture and urban design. So shifting from that to more of a researcher role has definitely changed what I as a young person am trying to do. So in the start, we were trying to again work on policy implementations, giving like direct inputs to not just the Council of Architecture, but also working with firms and trying to work on something called adaptive reuse. So you don't use new materials, but you use what is already existing. For example, there's this whole mill complex that was, since the colonial times, from the British era, there were again buildings that stood there as mills, but they later were repurposed into restaurants, etc. So there could be a lot of different ways that this could be done. And then right now, as a researcher, again, not just in climate mobility, but also in ecosystem restoration, this is the job of young researchers in this space, to not just restrict ourselves to the domain of writing articles or writing important publications and research papers, but also to advocate for this research. Because in the end, I know that nobody is going to read my 500-page thesis other than my professor, and not even my guide. They might just look at the 10 slides, that's it. But when we give policy recommendations to diplomats, it has to be in a certain non-jargony language. I wouldn't talk about COP the way I do with negotiators with them. Similar to that would be my solutions. So there are really, really simple things. For example, what architecture teaches us, or just urban living climates teach us, is something where we can, again, as Ashik was talking about nature, there's not just inspiration in nature, but also mimicking of nature. An example is the Zira Island here in Azerbaijan, which again mimics the 7 peaks. And this could be, again, not just biomimicry, but also biophilic design, which is basically something that, again, loving nature in a way. So you're as simple as green roofs, green walls. Nordic architecture is an example where you can, again, mitigate or stop heat from coming in, stop heat from going out through these couple of changes in the roofs. And that is what we have been seeing, that mud houses are much better when you have to fight against heat waves. No tin roofs, simple things like this. You can have terracotta tiles, which are, again, barely a rupee, about 3 rupees, so that's like 0.3 mannat. And again, there are different sustainable housing models for, again, people who migrate, because the problem we are seeing is rural areas do not have the jobs that sustain livelihoods and aspirations anymore. Nobody wants to plow away for food when they're not respected. Nobody wants to work in fields or, again, professions that do not get the respect they mandate. And that's why they move out towards cities to get more jobs, to get more incomes, while us who are living in urban areas, we dream of a place which does not have concrete, where I can like touch grass finally. And that's the duality, right? So the housing itself needs to change. We need to push our governments. For example, in India, we have the whole housing policy which mandates concrete houses, because it's called pakka. It's called, again, this is a slang, or this is an Indian term for stable and, again, secure housing, but it does not have to be this way. Our ancestors used to live better and more appropriately on a regional context. We don't need to copy paste things that we see not in our country. When you don't need glass domes to survive, you don't need concrete to survive. And this, again, means the housing for migrants themselves. If you talk about, again, what Ashik said about infrastructure, basic things like water availability is an issue if you don't address the amount of people coming in, and if you don't address the climate that you live in or the resources that you already have.
Thank you so much for giving us examples, but I also feel like we do have the research, we do have examples, we do have the ability to go for the South-South approach, but if we look at the dynamics of Pakistan, Bangladesh and countries in South Asia, they do not tend to go to adapt to those examples, and as youth I think we should advocate for that much. And again, as you said, our politicians are people who may not have the background in climate or may not have the background in environment, yet still they are handling those ministries, and they do not often tend to go for intersection of those, like what does the finance department or ministry has to do with climate, and what does the education department has to do with climate, and what does the health department has to do with climate, and at the end it's just flooding and it's just disasters and it's just chaos. So in South Asia it is quite a challenge to address climate mobility, but as youth I think we are pushing for that. We are open to any questions from the panelists if you would.
You talked about the need to involve.
Name.
My name is Vikram. I'm a student from the University of Chicago. You talked about the need to involve local communities in sort of a lot of the decision making. And my question is especially in terms of rural communities, which you said are looking more at sort of economic security over the climate disasters themselves. How do you do that? Like how do you involve rural communities and give them ownership over the infrastructure you're developing?
Do you want to take this?
Sure. So most of my research work is in rural areas, and so in the context of India, one of the first agreements that, for example, Mahatma Gandhi wanted was sovereignty for the villages, and he wanted decentralized government systems. It does not work for 1 billion people. That's a sad reality, and it's a lot of work to adapt it. But the way to give them their resources again is to still have a decentralized mechanism. So what I mean by that is there are village communities that again not only get the funding but also have the mandate to select people who would do certain specific tasks. So if you talk about the water resources managing, there are 3 women. For example, in Maharashtra, in the context of Maharashtra, I can give you more details later, but there is the water community, which again works with the Jal Shakti Ministry or the Water Ministry of India. Then you have a forestry department, which again looks at forest rights, land rights, and again the ownership by indigenous people, what resources they are using. So with these different several communities, you don't really have this thing called the panchayat, where again the village community is supposed to sit, there is one leader, and other than that, other people in the village also get power, and through systems like startups, FPOs, because again, money talks. So if you give the agricultural laborers who don't have any resources, any ownership, and farmers who are either medium or large farmers, so about a land holding size of 4 hectares to about 10 hectares in area, these people will command power again, because what we see is even if you give the villages this structure and a platform, people who have power are the ones who are able to speak. And again, having these meetings separately with women, because it's still hard to go against this miasma of, are women even allowed? Can you show your face? Do you even open your ghungat? So there's a lot of different social aspects you have to take care of, because no matter how progressive you are, you have to respect their culture, you have to respect their ideals. So there are different parts of going through it. I hope that answered your question. Okay.
Any other questions?
So, my name's Eugene. I'm also a student at the University of Chicago. So, in like situations where there's funders providing money to rural communities, there's obviously going to be a large power difference, and basically the person who feels who's the funder might feel like they need more control of this, like of the situation of the infrastructure development, because they're actually providing the funds. How do you sort of make sure that the person who's providing the funds doesn't assume complete control, and how do you like make sure that the farmers are actually willing to have that control over the money and not, I guess, give power to the actual funder?
Is it you, Evan?
Okay. Really impressed by you, Chicago, right now. So, again, in the context of my project, we were working on watershed area management in, again, 5 village clusters in Maharashtra. And we saw the opposite power dynamic, that it was funded by the World Bank. And of course, they wanted things like monitoring, assessment of the project. Are we able to achieve those KPIs, which were again translated into impact factors, numbers, etc. But what we saw was the NGOs and the implementers were actually having to go almost plead with the farmers like, hey, you're doing this, should we try this as well? Should we go for like agrobiodiversity now? Do you want to conserve water? So they were having to give them things for free. For example, drip-based agricultural systems, which again save water, or you have again solar pumps and solar panels that are again helpful to them. They don't give a crap. They don't care. They're like, I already have everything I need. What I need to do is adapt to the changing climate. And you have to come to them on their own terms to explain to them, your unavailability of water is being caused by climate change. You not being able to go to school, having all this pollution, is because you're doing stubble burning. But again, you have to give them solutions as well. You have to give them appropriate technology, which is again something we focus in IIT Bombay. But there's a thin line between what I see as funders, because they are mainly talking to the NGOs. They are the ones who are having that power struggle with them. You never really see them on ground. What they come for is monitoring and checking if it is the same as reported. And that also, at least for our project, happens once a year.
Maybe I can also take your question. What you asked, I can feel that because I'm working with the funder people. So that is actually the situation in some aspects. So there are different kind of like projects. So what Ayadi mentioned about at the very root level, people are not willing to adapt with new knowledge. They know already they had, even they are open to have some loss and damage, but they are not gonna take new technologies, new knowledge that they haven't like inherited from their parents and grandparents. So that is one aspect. And then when it comes about maybe we already have 4 types of technology or solutions available, everyone knows, and when we need to choose one from them. we had this type of experience, especially in the coastal region due to the saline intrusion in waters. So for the drinking water scarcity, we had some maybe local, very easy rainwater harvesting technologies. Then we had the reverse osmosis technologies, then some mixed technologies. So that is where the funders try to push for their interest. That you do not focus on rainwater harvesting. You focus on the RO because they have some link with some maybe company they want to sell those technologies. So yeah, that is a situation. But what IRB said, that is the solution. That to have the perception from very root level that they do not want this. If you, yes, you can implement this, you can construct this, but maybe in 1 and 2 years it will be nowhere to found. So that is the solution I have mentioned.
I hope that answers your question. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm not from the University of Chicago, so my question won't be as intelligent. And apologies if this is covered already. I unfortunately joined a little late. So I walk in here and I see Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, which you don't see often together. And you know our countries are facing a climate and environmental crisis that I don't know has been seen anywhere else in the world. I'm talking about the air quality. And at least what I've noticed is that our governments, I'm from Pakistan by the way, our governments, don't really take ownership. They're very quick to blame the other across the border. But what they have to do is really work together and collaborate. It's a very open question. Do you see this happening? How do we make it happen? Or do you know if anyone is kind of working on this specific problem of having this dialogue? Of course, we have all our delegates here. I don't know if they're actually talking to each other. I haven't seen any specific forum besides this one, where all three are at the podium.
Okay.
I guess we all can answer that.
Yes, you will.
Go Ashik, please.
I want to go first because, we are working together. Many of our researchers, or I would say youth researchers. Maybe it was 3-4 months ago. I was talking to a lot of people about this type of transboundary and South Asian collaboration in terms of disaster management, flood management. Flood management is impossible without transboundary cooperation. And at one point, I started discussing with one of a kind of NGO from Bangladesh that if we can have this type of project in collaboration with Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, maybe also with Nepal. So 4-country cooperative disaster management or flood management because of the shared river basin. And they were like, but because of the political situation, do you think it would be good to collaborate with Pakistani organization? So we have this kind of mindset. But what I feel that the early stage researcher, they are very much open to collaborate. So I would say that's the hope. I don't know what would happen if me or Ayadi or Noor get involved in politics or we started working with the government. Maybe that time definitely we would also need to have some political advocacy as well. But it is clear that those natural systems do not have the country boundaries.
Yeah.
Yes. So we must need to work in a collaborative way. Otherwise, the disaster management, hydroclimatic disaster management is not possible.
Yeah, I definitely hear you and I see you because again, it's like I consider all of these people my very good friends. Ashik is almost family to me, and if you come outside, like Hindi mein baat karne ka alag hi maza hai, which I mean it translates to in a country outside South Asia, it's different to speak in your own language. So we are constantly together. So on your last question, I don't know who the delegates from Pakistan are. We have been talking to a lot of different Pakistani partners. Pakistan has a pavilion here at COP. So that solidarity amongst young people is amazing because we know that South Asia has to be a bloc, it has to be together. Talking on diplomacy and research, so my first research area was the GBM, so Ganga, Brahmaputra and Meghna Delta Basin, which is again China, Nepal, Bangladesh and India. Our problem was getting access to data. even if my university was willing to support this research, a couple of universities were. I won't name the countries, but they did not want to share data. And then when that request came, we also became unwilling to be like, why should we share Indian data with you? What are you doing with this? So that research collaboration is quite hard. It could be done through organizations like Ringo, which is again a constituency for researchers, but also through direct university collaboration. So for example, IIT Bombay has a good relationship with Tsinghua University, and that's how we trade ideas, insights, and again work on research together. So it has to be through an MOU and a lot of diplomacy established through research to again get over the politics of all of this. And because again my research area currently is the Sundarbans, which is again not just the West Bengal part, because I can't draw a line. It's actually the Bangladesh and West Bengal together. It also means that there are already efforts underway where we are working together. So maybe we talk more about this, because again, as Ajik said before, there are no lines that we can draw, and there's a lot of diplomacy that exists on a geopolitical level. And as researchers, sometimes we don't need to get into it. We can just work together and push our governments together, because it's not just air pollution that again flows from New Delhi and Punjab, the Sindh area again back, but also our aquifers that are linked together. We still don't know which aquifers lie where and where those boundaries are. So would be happy to see what we can do and how we can help. Thank you for your question.
I hope that answers your
If
question.
you also want to take
Yeah, I just was thinking, one of our mentors, I was having a problem with my startup, and it was going to be more of a political issue, and I told him that I have a problem with my startup, what do I do? And he said, this is a power structure, and if you tend to break the power structure, you'll only end up banging your head against the wall. So you have to go or find a way that you go across that power structure and find ways. So that means to innovate or to go for collaborations among the youth or the NGOs or as the universities, as Ayadi said, and considering the power dynamics or the power struggles in South Asia among these countries. I think climate shouldn't be dragged into those talks. Unfortunately, it is, because climate does not know any politics or any countries or any boundaries. Yet still in this region, it is dragged into talks, political talks or political agendas or even political mandates, and they use it as a tool. It shouldn't be used as a tool, because the lives of people are at stake. So yeah, as youth, we are pushing for that, because in the whole Blue Zone and the Pavilion area, we tend to collaborate. I went up to a few Indians myself who are experts in climate health nexus, because that is my area of interest, and I was like, hey, do you want to bring those technologies to Pakistan? Maybe I could be the one who would be able to do that and talk to my teachers and talk to my universities and stuff. But again, yes, I have to choose a path that does not involve politics directly. As you, this is something I can do. I don't know what will be what would happen after that, but yes, my intentions are very much clear and very much straightforward, and I don't know if they would like it or not, but there is a responsibility on my shoulders, and I tend to take those responsibility and give a solution to not just my country but also the generations that will be coming next. So I hope that answers your question. That helps. Thank you so much. Yeah. Any other questions? Because we are just, yeah, please.
If you can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, I'm Prab. I'm based in the Philippines, and I spent the last few years working in fintech, just trying to enable credit access in rural communities. This question comes in part because it's something Ashik touched on, and you also work on with rural communities, right? Very fundamentally, rural communities represent powerful vote banks. They do know this, but a lot of their problems they do not ascribe to climate change. It's in the bucket of economic security. Given your experiences, is it still worth fighting a communication battle to say, hey, you're having to migrate or go to the city because of climate change, or speaking of it in different terms so that they actually can put pressure on political leaders? Because green parties have surfaced in the West more so, but at least in South Asia and even in Southeast Asia, it's a non-existent topic. You can't expect someone to make a climate or environmentally sensitive decision if they're trying to figure out where their next meal's coming from. Yeah. So my question is more from a communication perspective. Yeah. What do you think may work, or does something need to change in rural communities in particular on how we speak or engage with them?
Maybe I can start. I am from a very, very, very rural level, small level village where we had our first electricity connection in 2006, so you can understand. And my parents still live there. I go visit frequently. Maybe we have 10,000 people living in this village, and among them most probably 20 or 15 people who are politically engaged or politically, like, they try to get information or think about politics. So it's pretty tough in this context of South Asia, that their 24 hours moves in thought of their next meal, what they will earn for tomorrow. But also those maybe 15 or 20 people who are politically aware, it's also challenging for us to build their capacity or provide them the education of climate change. Because of the livelihood issues, most of the people, most of the educated people, they are moving towards the city areas, and only the people staying are those maybe who they do not have a lot of education. They are maybe doing farming or have some small business. So it is, I would say, not very easy for us to make them aware, but it should be our responsibility, not their responsibility, to have the knowledge. So we need to think how we can communicate with them, with the person who have no knowledge or no thinking of anything of this aspects.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. But the context we're talking about right now is climate change because of the platform we're in. So at least for me, the reason I'm talking about climate in this way and trying to explain or just speak about this issue in terms of climate is because I'm here, I'm on the stage and I'm speaking about this. In rural areas, what I talk to them is about your wells are sinking, the water level in your wells have sunk by 11 feet in the last 1 year, and it's not getting any better. What is the reason? And you don't tell them it's climate, you tell them how to know these signs, how to adapt to them better, and that's where mobility again comes in. So for example, exactly as you said, this is also the stance of the Indian government, for example, that activism is not what we need in India. You can't expect young people or even anybody who cares about climate as well to constantly be on a rally, to not go to school, to not take a job, to not earn for their livelihood, and there's no other way to say it but take a placard and tell people to do something. You can't really engage in political dialogue as much in India because, again, the reality is that you can't afford to. And this is exactly what is happening in rural areas, that for example, the women who are educated, they are also suffering through a lot of not just political stigma but also social stigma. So our problems in the rural areas are connected to climate. Definitely they are. This is how we explain it to the funders, to the governments, whoever is willing to listen. But it's a socio-economic problem. It's again really exacerbated by these climate extremes, but they are not directly caused by it. They're caused by human action. So I think that is the narrative that we're trying to build, and we can definitely have more conversation about it. But this narrative constantly keeps on shifting because, again, people primarily care about themselves, their families. How will you survive?
Yeah, I hope that answers your question. And with that, we have come to the end of this panel discussion. Thank you so much, Ashik and Ayadi, for being here with us today. And thank you so much for the participants to listen to us and to engage with us. Thank you so much.